This is the Creative Market Free Goods Roundup for the week of January 26, 2015. As usual, there are 6 different free goods, but they are free this week only. So if you watch this video, any of these items look like something you might have a use for, be sure to pick them up this week while they're still free. Links to all these items will be in the description. So first up we have Altitude, which is a WordPress theme. This is a fully responsive WordPress theme for bloggers, so I'm actually going to shrink this down a little bit so you can see how it reacts as I shrink it down. It does a pretty nice job of scaling everything down as it becomes much smaller, although if you keep an eye on this text right here at the top, when I shrink it really small, it does start to cut off that type a little bit, so do keep that in mind if you end up using this. You might want to keep this headline a little bit shorter if you're very concerned about mobile devices, but everything else looks really solid as I continue to scroll down to the bottom here. Now I'm just going to bring this back up to full size so we can take a better look at it. So when you view it on an actual desktop, the first image is a really large hero image with a nice call to action button that's really popular in web design right now. If I continue scrolling down here a little bit, there's a section for thumbnails as well as pages, archives, categories, all the different ways you can sort your content, and at the bottom there's a very simple footer with copyright information. I'm gonna go back up to the top here and click on blog so we can take a look at that. The images inside the blog aren't clickable, which I always like clicking on images to go into a page, but that's not really a huge problem. You just click on the actual title to go in there, and all the images at least shown on this website are landscape. I haven't seen any portrait or more square examples, so I'm not sure if that's possible or not. I'm assuming they're formatted to be viewed just like this, but if you do click on a section, it'll bring you to that item's particular page where you can write a description. There's buttons to go backwards and forwards throughout all the posts, as well as a comment section. And at the bottom of the post comment here, there's a nice little call out for all the different types of customizations you can add to your type to do call outs or link your things to other pages, stuff like that. A post-it button. On the side here is all the various navigation that you come to expect in a blog. I'm going to go back up at the top here and hit on features, and this is a very straightforward page, just calling out some of the different things that you can do with this particular theme. And then just like on the other page, there's a comments section right below it. Go back up top here to the last page, which is called sample page. And the sample page is just a grouping of text to kind of show how the layout could look. You could also, I'm assuming, throw in some images in there to make it a little bit more exciting. And then the comments section, as well as all the navigations on the side, just like shown before. And also I forgot to mention on the top navigation here, there is a section for Twitter, Facebook, Google+, various social icons. They're all nice and up front, so people will hopefully click on them when they go to your website through this particular theme. But it's a very solid theme. And aside from the weird thing that I saw with the text on the top on the very, very small mobile view, everything seemed to work really good. It's a very straightforward theme, so it should be very versatile because of that. I could see this working well for photographers or just various bloggers, even food bloggers. If you just flip around what pictures you use to fit your theme, it should be extremely adaptable. So if this theme looks like something you might have use for, be sure to pick it up this week while it's still free. Next up is Hipster Script, which is a font. This font is provided in OpenType font format, and there's a couple cool bonuses with this font. It also has a web font version as well as pencil brushes for Adobe Illustrator, which are shown right here. So I'll go over those in just a little bit here. But it has both uppercase as well as lowercase letters. So I type this out right here so you can get a better look at them. I'll zoom in a little bit closer so you can see the letters up close. Overall, the letters look pretty good. There's some areas, like if you look at this I to the J, there's a little bit of overhang here that I might go in and manually correct if I was doing this on a headline or something really important. But when you're zoomed out a little bit further back, it isn't very noticeable, so it's not really a huge deal. Although uppercase letters look really good, I'll just scroll through all those really quick here so you can get a better look at them. And also included with this set are numbers and a handful of other special characters. If I highlight over this and then go to type and then glyphs near the top here, you can see all the different special included characters here. It includes a lot of different specialty letters for different Latin-based languages, so let's say you want to type out in French, the letters are here to do that. Although I did notice they didn't include currency symbols, so like a pound sign or a dollar sign are not included with this set. I went ahead and typed out Free Goods Roundup so you can see how this looks when it's actually typed out into a sentence. It does a really nice convincing job of pulling off that handmade script font look. I actually really like how this font looks. I think it has a really cool flow to it. Like I said before, I might go in here just a little bit, kind of clean up some of these rough edges where the G and the O meets, stuff like that. If I already use this font a little bit larger where this stuff might stand out, but if you're using it pretty small, I don't think that'll be a huge concern, although you might want to just keep that in mind when you're working with this particular font. And here are the included extra brushes, the pencil brushes on this set. I made them a little bit larger so they're easier to see, and to get those, if you open up the file that's called the brushes and you don't see them, just make sure you go to Window and then Brushes near the top. And once you do that, I'll just drag this window up over here. There's a handful of different pencil looking brushes that are included that you can go ahead and apply to your work. So since the font is so nice and hand-drawn looking, this is kind of a nice touch where if you want to go ahead and illustrate some custom objects into here, or even make divider lines, stuff like that, these included pencil line brushes might come in really handy to give your work that handmade feel that should work really well in combination with the font. So I really enjoy this font, and it's a definite recommendation for me. me. And if you have any projects in mind, either right now or in the future, where you think this font might come in handy, be sure to pick it up this week. Next we have 20 Textures Mix Volume 1. This is a set of 20 different textures provided in both JPEG, PNG, as well as Photoshop brush formats. So I selected 5 of the textures at random here, in this case the JPEGs, to show inside Adobe Photoshop. So if I go to Image and then Image Size, you can see that these are 3000 by 2000 pixels, so these textures are pretty darn big and should work good for pretty much any web application and most digital print applications. And I'm just going to scroll through these 5 different examples so you can get a better idea of what they look like. And I'll zoom in a little bit closer on this one in particular so you can get a better idea of what this looks like really up close. This is at 200%, so I'm going to zoom back out to 100% here. So this is a pretty unique texture, and I should note that the ones that have a black background are the JPEGs. The PNGs have a white background, and all the elements that are white in these ones, so if I invert this quick, you'll see how it looks. This is essentially what the PNG would look like, and this is how I would tend to personally use a lot of my own textures. So if you want to invert these textures and you want to use the JPEGs instead of the PNGs, just hit Control-I on a PC or Command-I on a Mac on that layer, and it will go ahead and invert that. So here's the next one. This is the black version, and if it were to be the transparent PNG version, it would look similar to this. And this is actually a very cool texture that I like quite a bit. I think there's a lot going on here that shows a lot of depth. And then the last one I'm going to show, I'll actually show you how these look overlaid on a logo object, just so you can get an idea of possible use scenario for these. So I'm going to zoom to the next one. This is a nice texture with a lot of vertical linear movement. I'm just going to flip it using Control-I on a PC or Command-I on a Mac to show you what it looks like a little bit better as it might be applied to an object. There's actually a lot of interesting organic complexity in this particular one with holes like this. How the darkness of the lines tends to vary so much with some of these being filled in, and then there's a much lighter kind of shadowing throughout. Now I'm going to go to the last one I'm going to show aside from the example here. So this one reminds me almost of a textured kind of plastery wall, something along those lines. I'm just going to invert this quick so you can see what it would look like. If you want to use the PNG version, it would be very similar to this. So this is a nice and subtle texture that you could add to a logo mockup or something like that if you want to give it kind of that worn and roughened appearance, or even that kind of textured handmade feel. And on this last one here, if I turn off this object I made, here's what the texture looks like in the raw format that is provided, although they don't show a background. So when you open up the file, it'll look something like this, but if you just add in a white background, you can see it looks like a little bit better. And I went ahead and applied it to this logo layout right here, so you can see what it looks like when it's actually applied to something. I think it does a really nice job in this case of giving this almost a wooden appearance. So I'm just going to turn that texture off really quick so you can see what it looks like without it. And then with it, I think with it adds quite a bit of interesting complexity. So silhouettes, illustrations, simple logos, all these sorts of things, I think these textures would be a really good candidate for all of that. So if these textures look like something you might have use for either now or in the future, be sure to pick this up this week while it's still free. Next up is Handmade Bubbles. This is a set of 32 different handmade watercolor speech bubbles, just like the ones shown here, and they're provided in PNG, Illustrator, as well as EPS file formats. So I've selected 6 of them at random to show inside Adobe Illustrator since there are so many. If you like how these look, I do highly recommend just picking up the pack for free and checking everything that's included out. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer so we can get a better look at these. And the colors provided are either purple like this or green like this one right here. If you don't like the provided colors, I'd suggest using the PNGs and just shifting the colors in Photoshop. Changing the coloration inside Illustrator would probably be a pretty huge pain since the way these are grouped, and that's something to kind of keep aware of when you're using these, at least inside Illustrator. If you look at how many paths this particular object has, it's pretty intense. So as you start to add more and more of these into any given project inside Adobe Illustrator, it will noticeably start to slow your machine down. So I would say, at least inside the vector format versions, use these kind of sparingly until you kind of figure out how much they do or don't affect your system's performance. But there's a nice selection of these, and these do remind me quite a bit of the other watercolor speech bubbles that were available on Creative Market a few weeks ago. If I zoom in really close here, you can get a better look at how it pulls off that watercolor look inside of vector format. So there's a lot of subtle transitions between the different colors to give it that softer, more watercolory look. As you zoom out a little bit further here, it becomes pretty convincing. And like I said before, keep an eye on how many paths this thing has. There's certainly quite a few, and it looks like this probably took a really long time to make, but because there are so many paths, just be aware it might slow down your machine a little bit as you start to use several of these at once. But this is a really huge pack of 32 different watercolor speech bubbles, just like the ones shown right here. So if you like how these look, I recommend that you check out the entire pack. It's free to download, so you might as well just do it, and you can kind of check out everything that's included. There's a really nice and diverse selection of different watercolor elements to choose from. So if this pack looks like something you might have use for either now or in the future, be sure to pick it up this week while it's still free. Next we have 12 free vintage logo mockups. So this is a set of 12 different logo mockups for Adobe Photoshop, and because they are in folders, I don't think Photoshop Elements will work with this, but you can always try it out. And the size of this is really large. If I go to image size, it's 3000 by 2000 pixels, so that should be plenty big for most print or digital applications. And the way this particular file works is at the top here there's a layer called double click on me. If you double click on that, it will bring up a new window where I've pasted my logo. By default it has this placeholder image right here, but all you have to do is put in your new image, and then you can just toggle off or delete the sample image that was included, and then just save this new window that's opened, and then you can go ahead and close it. And once you do that, it'll automatically update this throughout all the different variations included in this set. So I'm going to start at the top here with the first one, and I should also note there's a folder called color settings where if you click that, it'll apply this vintagey blue washed out overlay across all these different logo samples. I personally like these a little bit better without this setting turned on, but you can go ahead and experiment with that if that's something you're interested in. So I'm just going to scroll through all the different options here so you can get a look at all the different logo options that are included. A lot of these are very, very distressed and extremely grungy in their appearance, so if that's something you're looking for, this set is a really strong candidate for that. And also, as you can tell as I scroll down through these, this one doesn't work particularly well as my logo is white and this is white, but this is actually a very cool one, is that they do a really nice job of making the logo look like it is part of this scene. They spent a lot of time masking everything out so it looks pretty darn convincing. Like the way the brown sort of dirt covers this as well as the texture is a nice kind of combination of effects. And there's also a little smiley face if you can see it right here at the bottom. I'm going to keep on scrolling down here. So I'll zoom in a little bit closer on this one just so you can get a good idea of how this texture looks up close. It's really a very convincing job, and they definitely spent some time making sure these textures worked really well when you actually place them over an image so that the overall effect of depth isn't lost. It doesn't look like a flat texture. It looks like it's really painted on there, which is pretty cool. Here's another one where there's a nice multi-layered amount of effects. If I zoom in on the first part of the M here, you can tell that not only does it have a bunch of textures in the white of the logo itself, but it also has this secondary depth layer right here of this rusty red and the crack alongside it. That gives it a really cool amount of depth and it makes it a very interesting piece. This one looks to me almost like the side of a shipping crate or container, that rigid metal look. And as I mentioned before, they do a really nice job of conveying depth. There's a nice subtle shadow that goes through these ridges on the tops and the bottoms here to make things look a little bit more dimensional. And here's the last one. It's a nice image of a wooden board, tons of texture going on. I'll zoom in a little bit closer once again on this just to get a better idea of what this texture looks like up close. They do a really nice job of making this look quite convincing on the actual application. So if you want to present your logos or illustrations or silhouettes, anything like that on very heavily distressed kind of grungy background objects, this is a really cool set to have. So if you think you'll have use for this either now or in the future, be sure to pick it up this week. And last we have Vindins, which is a handwritten font. This font is provided in OpenType font format and also includes a web font kit in case you want to use these on the web. So I have it open right here inside Adobe Illustrator here to show it. And on the top here are the lowercase letters, and on the bottom here are the uppercase letters, both of which look like caps, but when you type in uppercase, it adds this additional element on the sides right here, almost like a linear shadow. I'm not quite sure how to explain it in the best way. If you look at how the letters look when they're typed in a lowercase manner, they still look like caps, so this would definitely work as a headline or display font if you wanted to do that. Only thing I did notice with the lowercase font in particular is that it has a really wide leading by default, which is the distance between the drop line between one line of text to the next. If you want to change that, you can go to Window and then Type and then make sure Character at the top is selected. And right here on your screen, it looks like two A's with a line going down. If you make that number smaller, it'll just push these together a little bit closer in case you wanted to make these have a little bit less distance between the different lines of text, in which case I think it looks a little bit better when they're a little bit closer up, but that's not a huge deal. Here's the uppercase letters. I think the lettering on this one's just fine and looks pretty good. And also included with this set are all the numbers and a bunch of different special characters. If I select the text here and then go to Type and then Glyphs, it includes a bunch of special different characters you can kind of take a look at right here. Not a huge amount, but there certainly are some extras in here like a copyright symbol or the pound sign that you can use if you want to go ahead and do that. And at the bottom here I typed out Free Goods Roundup so you can see what it looks like in actual use. If I were to use this as a display font as it's typed out right here, I might shrink down the distance a little bit between the different words, but that's really a personal style preference. I think it looks pretty cool. It has a very interesting handmade look to it. If I zoom in really close in the letters here, you can get a better idea of how they look. They have some really rough edges around them that kind of give them that handmade appearance, especially when you're zoomed out a little bit more, but none of it looks like it was a mistake or poorly applied. It just kind of gives it that rough handmade vibe, which I think works really well on this particular font. So if you think you'll have use for this font either now or in the future, be sure to pick it up this week while it's still free. So that's it for this week's free goods, and do remember they are free this week only. So if any of them look like something you might have use for, be sure to check out the description where I'll place links to each one of them. And as always, if you found this video helpful, please like and favorite, and if you want to see this video every week, please subscribe. This video is released every Monday to let you know what's free this week on Creative Market. Thank you for watching.